So good morning and welcome back to all of you who have been here before, and welcome to Phoebe, who's been with us before on Sunday, but never in this space as our new sanctuary. I'm always excited and happy to be here, and I'm grateful that we have this opportunity to come together to care and to connect, to be a part of this community on Sundays. It's really special. It's a blessing to me, and I believe it's a blessing to the world. So I am really excited. And I know that many of you are pretty excited today, too. In just a little while, we're going to hear from Phoebe. We're going to join in the discussion that's what we would call a mini introduction to what in Access Consciousness circles is known as Talk to the Entities. What an interesting topic. You're not going to hear that at any other center in this town on this day. I guarantee that. So they might be talking about spirits, but it ain't going to be quite the same thing. So in conjunction with Phoebe's presentation, I'm going to share today on an aspect of Ernest Holmes's writing that many of us don't very often consider. That is the possibility of potential presences, what we could call others. We could call them spirits or entities or even perhaps energy systems. We could understand that they are altogether unrelated to the human species and never have been, or perhaps there are those of us who have been here and transitioned out of the physical. Okay? In a little while, Phoebe's going to talk to us more about what she's referring to when she talks about entities, but for now, I am going to share from a place of some of Ernest's writings that consider specifically what happens when we're dead. I don't know about you guys, but I have some questions about that mess, okay? I mean, really, what do you believe that might happen with us when we lay down the physical body? Many of us might answer that question with uncertainty. I know that I would be one of those. So before we can really consider that question, I have another one for you. And if you've had this kind of experience, you can let us know just by simply putting your hand in the air. Have you had an experience where it felt like a sort of communication was taking place or had taken place with someone that you knew that had passed on out of the physical realm? If you've had that experience, just put a hand up. I'm telling you, there's a lot of hands in the air. Many years ago, actually, going on about 18 years ago now, my mother passed away. And at the time I was working at the health department right up the road. And my family ultimately had moved here from Maryland many years ago, so we took my mother back up to Maryland to bury her. And of course there was there's just always a lot of uproar with families and situations and things going on around that kind of an experience. And so it took a while. I finally got back to town and I finally went back to work. And when I went back to work, I received a card from the person who was the director at the health department then. Some of you may know him or remember him. His name was Randall Turpin. He's actually still wandering around in the physical realm as far as I know. Randall was an amazing person. And he gave me a beautiful card. The front of the card really struck me because it was one of my favorite Monet paintings. And I actually have kept the card, but not just because of the picture. The message in that card was incredibly astonishing to me. Because what he said was, those who love us are never far from us. And that message from him, to me, I found incredibly, almost off-putting. Because I thought that he was a very staunch representative of strict, mainstream religious teachings. And I found it very unlike him. He was always businesslike in his approaches in the office whenever I encountered him. It seemed the kind of a comment that would come from someone who wanted to kind of lay a hand on and say, I want you to know your mother's love is still within your reach. That can never be taken from you. Rather than someone who's all business, rather than someone who I thought probably adhered to some pretty staunch religious protocol. Interesting. Many of us probably believe in some sort of life hereafter, some sort of immortal, I can say the word, immortal expression. When we look at the Science of Mind text, how many of you have taken a gander at this or read part of it or taken a class on it? A lot of you. I know it's still scary. I resist the heck out of this book, you know. And I've been studying this crap for 15 years, God love him. Okay, I mean, I don't know. We need like Cliff's notes. We actually have Cliff, what's his last name? Cliff Rubin's notes on the Science of Mind text. I haven't read that book yet, but there are Cliff's notes, so to speak, on the Science of Mind text. But when we look at that book, what we find out is that Ernest actually defines immortality. He tells us that immortality is the understanding that we shall persist after the experience of physical death. And he says, and I find this part kind of interesting, that we shall retain a full recognition of ourselves and that we shall have the ability to recognize others as well. I never thought that might happen. For many of us, having been enculturated by mainstream Christian teachings, we probably have an idea that centers around the belief that eternal life goes something like this. We either end up with God in a good place, right? Or we go to hell and we are forever and completely out of the reaches of the love of God, forever punished. Ugh. You know, this is a segue, but I'm going to tell you, if you go online and look, droves of people are leaving church, quote unquote. I mean, that's a statistic. Churches are dropping by the hundreds, literally every week, probably. Okay? It's kind of a scary business to be in. But in the face of that, I don't really blame people, do you? Okay? But that's what I was taught. Actually, I grew up in the Catholic faith, and, you know, we hail from the Irish. There's always got to be a half step in there somewhere, you know. They have a place called purgatory. And purgatory is a temporary situation. It's kind of a place where the soul goes to be cleansed or purified of its low-level sins. And you got that sin word in quotes, right? Because we don't really buy any of this here. But to continue with purgatory, I like the idea because, you know, the church, I think, is kind of in some ways all about making sure you pay before you die and afterwards as well, okay? Purgatory is kind of like a car wash. You know, you go through it. If you can't make it through life without screwing up, okay, without living to the impossibly perfect standards that the church says is the only way someone gets in heaven, okay, then you can go to you're not a mass murderer or something, right? Okay, so you're kind of in between. You might be on the lighter side of dark, but, you know, you get to go to purgatory, you get cleaned up there, and you go on maybe to heaven. But they got the people that are left behind working on it too, because those folks are told, you got to pray for that sinner's soul or they'll never get out of purgatory. God will keep them there indefinitely. I love that. Excuse me, but when I was writing this is what came up, and it's what in my notes. Damn, what an interesting concept. Excuse my language, okay? And yes, I have all the Irish to go with that little four-letter word, okay? In 1975, my father died. He became ill in February. He went downhill rapidly. Of course, we sought medical assistance, but by the 2nd of May, he had passed away from a malignant brain tumor that they told us was the size of a grapefruit. He never really came to at least in my presence, back to consciousness from the time he started drifting away. At that point in my life, I was a senior in high school. Now, you know, I was an Irish child. I hope I'm not throwing off anybody's gene pool here by saying that. But I was a colorful kid. We had moved here about a year and a half, 2 years before that, and I really wasn't happy with the move. So I kind of had a thumbs-up attitude to the whole universe and was like, you see what I think? This is what I think. I'm going to show you what I think, okay? And the little bad girl in me, the one that would spend a lot of time in purgatory, came out, okay? So the South was such an interesting place to be at that time. And oh, did I forget to mention, that I was about 6 months pregnant and not married when my dad died. It was really interesting here in the South in that situation in 1975. So my question to you is this. Where was my father when he communicated with me through the venue of a lucid dream where he appeared to me outside my bedroom window and said to me, I'm fine. I want you to know that I'm okay. And I want you to know further that I'm okay with your choices and that regardless of what's going on in your life, I love you. He and I had never been close. The strongest aspects of our relationship had probably been that both of us were murderously stubborn. Okay? I know where I got it from. I am his daughter. Okay? And get my back up and you won't get me to back down. Just might as well walk away. Okay? Ask some of those of you who are on the wisdom council. You know, you get to see the more colorful thing. But my question to you is, when I had that dream, I really believe to this day that I was having a very powerful communication from him from across that life-death bridge. Where was he? Okay? I have no idea. I don't know, I imagine that both the world of mental health, so to speak, and the church, and I'm not going to ask them, would look at that experience and tell me it was either a mental fantasy, the work of the devil, or perhaps just a facet of unhealed grief. I don't know. I'm not really asking any of them because I don't really care anymore. Okay? But again, let me ask you, what do you believe happens when we leave this physical plane? In Science of Mind, heaven and hell, as proposed in mainstream teachings, aren't really options. Now that may be good news for those of you who would join me in the darker side of purgatory, okay? Or maybe even somewhere else, okay? We understand in this teaching that heaven and hell are states of mind, okay? That they're states of mind that we experience while we're alive on this planet. And we also subscribe to the understanding that it is with our thought that we largely determine our state of mind. I don't know about you guys, but my thought is everything. That is truly, if you said, if I was going to take everything away, what would you want to keep? It would be that power of choice, okay, over what I'm thinking. Because I can change a situation. I know my mind. If I have to, I can check out good enough, okay, from a bad situation. I can take care of myself on the mental level. I know that, okay. It's very powerful. But so we understand, that heaven and hell aren't options. We've let go of that concept that of a super being, a God whose persona is spiced with whim or what am I trying to say? Orchestrated through capriciousness. We don't subscribe to a superior being that reflects anthropomorphic qualities that we might find in a very intensely, no offense ladies, menopausal woman, okay? We just don't buy that that's what the divine is like. I'm really grateful for that piece too. So here's another question. What do you believe in regards to God? The nice thing about this teaching, this is something that I really like about this, and I've been thinking about it a lot, is that I don't think we even have to believe in God to like the Science of Mind teaching as an understanding and a philosophy of life. Because what our faith is in this teaching is not just only some kind of divine presence back of everything. It's in the understanding that this universe, this world, is orchestrated, is governed through certain metaphysical laws, and that those laws are laws, and as such, they're equally administered. There is no give to the rich and take from the poor, or give to the mighty, and there's none of that. That only happens on a political level, okay? Not metaphysically, okay? And I don't worry too much about the political level because I look at it and go, it's going to work out. It's going to work out. I trust. and declare and know that it's going to work out, okay? Yeah, I might be saying something different in November, but we'll see, okay? So let's do this. Let's look at what part of what Ernest says in the chapter on immortality in the Science of Mind text. I'm going to read this, and I'm going to put glasses on to do it. And I want to start with a caveat, and that is this. Remember that Ernest wrote this, probably the bulk of this, sometime between 1920 and mid-1930s, okay? He uses the pronoun he everywhere. He doesn't mix it up. He doesn't make it non-genderish. And if that bothers you, and it bothers me some days, I have it on very good rapport with him that we can change those words, okay? We can make it our own to make it work for us. That's one of the things I really appreciate about this teaching, because I sure wasn't ever told that in any other religious teaching. So here we go. Here's Arnie, okay? If our full capacities go with us beyond the grave, we must be able to think consciously, to will, to know and be known, to communicate, and to receive communications. We must be able to see and be seen, to understand and to be understood. In fact, if one is really to continue as a self-conscious personality beyond this life, he can do so only if he maintains a continuous stream of the same consciousness and self-knowingness that he now possesses. Personal identity postulates memory. Memory is what binds into one sequence the old life with the new. This means that man must carry with him, after the experience of physical death, a complete remembrance, for it is to this alone that we must look for the link which binds one event to another, thus making life a continuous stream of self-conscious expression. To suppose that man can forget and still be a self-conscious identity is to suppose that one could cut off his entire past without destroying the logical sequence of personality. Remembrance alone guarantees personality. He goes on to question, where is this faculty of memory? Cut a man into the smallest bits and dissect every atom of his physical being, and you will never find memory. There is something about the personality which not only performs its functions, but also remembers what it has done, and which can anticipate future events. What is it? It is the thing we are talking about, the non-physical faculty of perception, the thing that knows. And here he likes to consecrate the term the knower with capital letters. He does that a lot in his writing. If you've read any of Ernest, you know that he's big into that. He calls it the knower. He goes on to say, if a human is to have an immortality worthy of his name, man must continue as he is now beyond the grave. Death cannot rob him of anything if he be immortal. He goes on to tell us, it is the indwelling spirit alone that maintains the identity. We continue. Through introspection, I know that I am, and by observation I note that when death comes, this I am appears no longer to be. The body lies cold, inert, lifeless. Its warmth, color, and responsiveness have fled. Is it possible for one observing this process to doubt that something tangible and real has left this plane? When the body is given back to the native elements from which it sprang, the knowing, the willing, and thinking factors that constitute human personality and an individualized stream of consciousness have departed. Now here's where, to me, Ernest gets very amusing. The table has 4 legs, yet it doesn't walk. The ear does not hear, nor does the tongue wag. Well, I don't know about that. Nor does, some of you may be grateful for that, nor does the tongue wag unless there is something or someone to wag it. The brain does not think. If the brain were endowed with power from on high, it would think on forever. Oh, that's just gross. Isolate it, and it will not think. It is the thinker using the brain who thinks. You know, here he's telling us that there is something, he calls it the knower, the thinker, whatever. I capitalized the word something as he calls it, and in some places he calls it with a capital I, something that lives beyond our physical expression. If you take the motor out of your car, will it run? Mine won't, okay. No matter how long I pray over it, it won't, okay? Ernest continues on to talk about the vehicle, so to speak, of our expression beyond the grave. Here's what he says. This part blows me away. Form is necessary to self-expression, and therefore we shall in fact have a body. We shall in fact have a body, and that body shall be comprised of ether. After I said a few four-letter words, I looked up the word ether on dictionary.com. Ether is a hypothetical substance supposed to occupy all of space. Ernest goes on to tell us ether is the last known analysis of matter. It interspheres, say that, interspheres all things and all spaces. The finest particles of matter are cemented together by ether. So ether is perhaps kind of like the essence of something. Here Ernest is essentially telling us we've got a spiritual body already that is contained within this physical one. When we lay down the physical one, what Abraham and Esther Hicks call croaking, okay, the spiritual body will sally forth on its own. I call that the perfect road trip. Let's go, okay? Rather flying around without no body thing to hold me back, okay? In seeing that we have a spiritual body already, Ernest indicates that we are not going to attain immortality, but that we are already immortal. He says our contention is not that dead men live again, but that a living man never dies. And I love that. Because there, what he's getting at, he's saying that there is part of every one of us that simply chose to be in this physical place. It didn't get born. When the body is over, it isn't going to die. It's going to keep going, whatever it is. Now, let's look at another question here you might have. Is there spirit communication? Oh boy, we're really getting out there, aren't we? Well, before I get into answering that, a la Ernest, I want to share a couple of things. Let's look at this and kind of set the stage. Ernest Holmes lived from 1887 until 1960. His point of highest influence was probably sometime during the period of the mid-1920s. By then he had traveled around the country and he had gone back to California and begun writing. Okay? The first edition of the Science of Mind text was published in 1926. And I think he actually published some stuff before that. So he was beginning to write. He was creating this kind of mail order school, which is what you did in the 1920s with that internet and all that kind of good stuff, okay? If somebody wanted your teachings, they subscribed to it and you sent them a lesson by mail. They sent back the work, you graded it, and so on. It went back and forth, back and forth. So he was doing that, okay? His point of highest influence, again, would have probably started sometime in the mid-1920s and run at least all the way up until the 50s and maybe, up until the 60s. And I don't know that his impact really is any less than today. It might be greater, who's to say? But we get it. He was living in California, too. And all of us know that that's a mecca for the most open-mindedness, kind of cutting-edge philosophies to come forth. I don't know. Why does everything, the weather and everything comes from that end, doesn't it? It's pretty weird, okay? So Ernest was alive and in his heyday, and he was practicing, if you will, during the time that spiritualism, that is the belief that spirits of the dead have both the inclination and the ability to communicate with us, those of us who are still alive, all of that was kind of coming to the fore. That started maybe a little earlier in the 1800s, but it was very popular. I know as a kid, I probably wasn't more than 6 or 7 when my neighbors, who were devout Quakers, and the parents would have croaked if they knew the kids had a Ouija board, but we would lock that bedroom door and whip that baby out and be in there scaring I'm going home now, y'all scare me too bad, okay? But at any rate, so it also makes it really understandable as to why there's a whole chapter about this kind of thing in a scientific textbook, okay? Because he was speaking to the masses and wanted to speak from a reference point that was very much in vogue for people at that time. Okay. What Ernest says about speaking to the dead and communication is really simple. He backs his work up with a reference to telepathy, that is, mental or thought communication from one of us to another, here on the physical plane. He states that this is a viable and well-documented ability, and he wrote that, again, sometime between 1920 and 1935 or so, okay? If you have questions about that, and most people do, my encouragement is go online and look for some really serious scientific data. Because if you look at Duke University or Washington State University or the Smithsonian Mag. I don't know if it's org or com, but the Smithsonian has a website called smithsonianmag.com or org. They've got lots of stuff about quantifiable, successful studies of documented telepathic communication between one person and another. What Ernest says is if it can happen between one of us and another of us on this plane, why can it not happen between us and those who have passed? Makes a lot of sense to me, actually. Okay? Why do we resist thinking along those lines so much? I don't know. Why do we resist that we have a capacity to experience life on all its different planes, a capacity that extends beyond the 5 senses? Because there's so much more going on. Maybe that's where the real show is. We can even look to Scripture, sure enough, and see a place where it references that. In the Bible, in John 4:3, we find that Jesus easily read the history of the woman at the well. He knew and told her that she had been married 5 times and that the man she was now living with was not her husband. He got it by reading her thought atmosphere, simply by picking up on all that stuff that we're all walking around with, okay? Because we've all got that floating around ourselves. There's another point here too. Ernest considers, what is it that's going on when it seems like others are profoundly in our minds and in our thoughts? My friend, many of you may have known Sabrina, who came here a time or two. She passed last May after a life really filled with a lot of physical trials. She came in sick and was sick with certain physical ailments all of her life. And so in many, many ways, I know her movement out of the physical was probably huge in terms of making things a lot easier and more comfortable for her. She didn't have the whatever it is that we've got going on with the physical thing. So often I feel her around me, and I say a few cuss words to her and say, if you were here, the trouble we would be getting into now, like Thelma and Louise, okay? I believe, and Ernest believed, that simply means that we are connected to that individual. He tells us in this chapter, I believe that an unconscious communication goes on more or less all the time, and that people whom we have greatly loved are still conscious of us. Maybe Mr. Turpin was right when he wrote that in that card. Ernest is careful here to elucidate that doesn't mean we're talking physical proximity close. because we get it that physical proximity only comes into play when we have a body, okay? And once we don't have a body, it's not an issue. One of the saddest things, awarenesses, that I've personally had since I came into this teaching is the experience of looking back through the past part of my life and seeing how certain teachings told me, led me to believe that once someone died, any communication, any relationship, any transference of love, anything with them was gone. Okay? To me, it is the saddest thing to think that when somebody's gone, there's just nothing that we can ever really tangibly connect with in terms of them. Last fall, one Sunday, I left here after our Sunday service, and I have to tell you that I kind of go out of here just like about as happy as I get, okay? Feeling good, loving you guys, and loving what we do here, and also being grateful, that our time together, that we've had that and that it's over and that I can go home and sit in my chair for a little while, and usually fall asleep is what happens after that, okay? But I had an experience on the way home which was really powerful. And that was this. I encountered a friend of mine who is a member of a very mainstream religious teaching. And in very short order last year, she lost her mother. And right before this experience, about 2 weeks before, she had lost her father. Both were very elderly, but for the most part, they were really healthy right up until boom. Okay, it just kind of, it kind of like was a little dip, and then, off we go. And so when I encountered this woman, she knows what I do, okay? And she burst into tears. And what she said to me was, I wish I could spend 5 minutes with my mom, because she was such a source of comfort for me. And she just helped me with my perspective so much. And in that moment, I want to tell you, I said a few nasty things, okay, about any teaching that she received that told her mom was gone. I went to her and I grabbed her hands and I said, let me tell you this. I believe this with all my heart. You go someplace and you get quiet where you will not be disturbed, and you just talk to her. And I guarantee you, she's going to feel the heartbeat of love moving from you, the truth of your honesty moving from you to her. Remember what Carol mentioned a little while ago, that our mission, if we choose to accept it, is to work on creating a world that is better for everyone. Cleaning up that stuff, even if it's with those dearly or not so dearly departed people, helps do that. If people come to mind as we're considering this today, think about it. When you get a chance and feel the moment is right, get in a quiet place. Get in a place where nothing is going to disturb you. Have a conversation with that person. If you need to say a few words of prayer, like we talk about in the South, maybe you want to give them a piece of your mind, go for it. Because you know what? That truth, that honesty will always and forevermore be representative of love. It will. They will feel the love expressed in that. Think, if you will, what would be different about your life today if you had grown up in a teaching that did not segregate our potential into alive and dead, okay? Here or it ain't real, okay? Think about the wisdom that your ancestors carried, that could be yours simply for the opening of looking toward it. I know if Anthony was here today, he would be glad to share with us his communications with his grandmother, who was Native American and brought him so much wisdom, just so much intuitive truth, okay? Think about what it would be like, and this is part of what we are here to do, is to create a situation here where everybody gets it, that those who love us are never far away from us. Okay? That we have only to turn and open to that, and their love will shine through from beyond the veil. At the very close of the chapter on immortality, I really encourage you to read this. If you don't read all of it, look toward the back of that chapter. The last 4 or 5 pages are Ernest's personal beliefs about immortality. And quite frankly, although I will never believe with everything he teaches, I don't have to. We don't have to. Okay? That's the cool thing about being here. It ain't this way or the highway. It's take what you like and leave the rest. Okay? But in the back of that chapter is just a component that's his personal belief stuff. Okay? And I find it very enriching. There's a quote there that I want to share with you as we close. He tells us time heals all wounds. It adjusts all conditions. It explains all facts. And time alone reconciles the visible with the invisible. We are born of eternal day, and it is the spiritual sun that will never set upon the very glory of what we are. We're God's stuff. I love you. Thank you.